If you have truly superhuman film trivia knowledge, and you have been following this channel very, very closely, then you probably already know why I watched Heart Like a Wheel. It's because this movie features my father's old mailbox, or more generally, because it was filmed partly in Olympia, Washington, which is where I grew up. Is there any reason to watch this movie if you aren't from my hometown? Maybe if you like drag racing, because this is a movie about Shirley Muldowney, a famous woman drag racer. But what if you don't like drag racing? Well, first of all, you're uncultured. But you might still like the movie, because even though it starts like a Hallmark movie, even though the first third is not good at all, once you get to the meat of the film, it is surprisingly okay. There are a couple great scenes, and actually, it's kind of my kind of movie, believe it or not, a psychological drama full of turmoil once you're done with the Hallmark part. Let's talk about Olympia a little bit, just a little bit, I promise, okay? Here it impersonates Schenectady, New York. Impersonates, maybe is the term. Why did they choose Olympia of all places? Why did they choose Olympia? I have no idea. But the rest of the movie was filmed in Irvine, California, and in a studio, so they probably wanted to stay on the West Coast. And, you know, they've always called Olympia the Schenectady of the West. Actually, that's not funny. Do not make that comparison, please. This movie is not showcasing the town, so it doesn't go past the Welcome to Olympia sign. Instead, it's a random collection of locations on the outskirts of town. Still, I mean, if you live there, you probably recognize them. You do catch a glimpse of the stairs of the old Capitol building, which I think also shows up in the film Body of Evidence, which is a ripoff of Basic Instinct, starring Madonna and Willem Dafoe, set on a houseboat in Olympia, Washington. 0 out of 10, don't recommend. Anyway, if you'd like me to do more videos about Olympia, just let me know. I'd be happy to, although I'm not sure there are any other movies that were filmed there, but we could potentially cover Shelton, Tenino, or any other major metropolitan areas that are nearby. One more thing to mention here is that I was participating in a type of viewership that I don't often talk about on this channel, where the movie is kind of a family heirloom. If you go on a long car ride with my dad, he will eventually bring out the stories about when the film crew came to town to make Heart Like a Wheel. They borrowed some signs from him. You can see them in the movie, in fact. Don't worry, I paused to look at them. They sprayed mud onto the buildings. This is movie magic. My dad used to run a gas station in a building that appears in this movie. It's a gas station in the movie. And even though it's supposed to be a different place and different time and a different story, it does capture something kind of vividly. And you know, for me, I never saw the gas station in its heyday, in its glory. I've seen pictures of it, and in fact, the building is still there. But seeing it move, seeing it on film, for some reason, feels kind of more real and more tangible, even though it's kind of less real in some ways. It's kind of funny, actually, because most of the Olympia scenes in this movie are set in the 50s or 60s. This movie's from the 80s. You know, when I think about my dad's gas station, I think of it as being a long time ago, but I think that was in the 70s. So the movie, actually, it makes it look even older, but that might somehow enhance my sense of nostalgia, might build on the heirloom effect. Wow, look at this old part of our, family history or something like that. It's interesting. I watched the movie with my dad, which was lovely. Let's get to the drag racing part. First, let me tell you that the movie stars Bonnie Bedelia, no relation to Amelia, but she is a relative of Macaulay Culkin and Kit Culkin, believe it or not. She is maybe best known as a television actor, but she was in a couple of cool movies as well, such as They Shoot Horses, Don't They? Small role, I think. Bedelia is pretty good in the movie. There are some weak points, like I said, and nobody can really salvage these, but she's pretty good. Now, I think if you're a fan of Shirley Muldowney, you might not agree exactly. It seems, by all accounts, like the production made Shirley Muldowney much more polished in the movie than in real life, and I'll come back to this in a minute. Beau Bridges is also in the movie, a relative of Jeff Bridges and Lloyd Bridges, of course. Beau Bridges is really good in this movie, playing Connie Kalita, a real drag racer. Is that the term? Drag racer? Someone in drag. I don't think that's it. Anyway, this character is interesting, and one of the highlights of the movie. Don Garlitz is another drag racer portrayed in the film. Hoyt Axton was a country musician who plays Muldowney's father. Hoyt Axton, remember him? Speaking of music, we do not hear Linda Ronstadt's Heart Like a Wheel in the movie. We have a somewhat predictable greatest hits kind of decade soundtrack, but it's okay. Overall, the cast is pretty decent. This mostly feels like a lowish budget movie, although they have a lot of drag races in it. They probably spent a lot on gas and tires, but yeah, it feels a little low budget, but the cast is, I would say, pretty good for what it is. Nobody can salvage the dips, but there are strong performances throughout, actually. Now, like I said at the beginning of the movie, it's not great. It feels like a Hallmark movie. Extremely cheesy story about how Muldowney started driving, and maybe this is what happened, but there's no need for flashbacks, right? If you are feeling extremely charitable, you could say that maybe these scenes are purposefully coated with the idyllic gloss of memory. But let's get real. The shortcomings are glaring. You will not like this part, most likely. The movie is a lot better later when it's closer to the present and the action is situated inside a more authentic-seeming context of drag races. We'll come back to that in a little bit as well. The earlier scenes, they expose the writers, the director, just about everyone involved with the movie. You can get a sense that Muldowney's life was not an easy thing to adapt, I guess. This film came out when she was at the peak of her success. And it's not hard to imagine execs thinking, hey, let's make a movie about this. But a drag race only lasts 10 seconds. What are you going to do for the other 1 hour, 29 minutes, and 50 seconds? Actually, this movie's longer than that. Unsurprisingly, the real story is not straightforward at all. And drag racing has its own intricacies, different competitions at different levels and different places. For the average person, it is not as legible as some other sporting events or even just some sports. It's not like the Olympics or March Madness. There's no big bracket. In fact, after watching the movie, I couldn't really tell you how these competitions work. I think there's some leagues of some kind, but who races who and when and why, I don't know. And so which races are you going to put into the movie? No, that's something you've got to decide. Now, my ignorance about racing before and after, it doesn't undermine the movie, but it hints that finding a Hollywood arc in all of this is not very easy. And there are places where they kind of get this wrong. There are a number of scenes, number of moments in the movie that don't really contribute to the plot. Instead, you get the feeling that they were seen by someone as important moments in Muldowney's life. Oh, we got to put this in because, when we did the interview, she talked about that or something like that. I'd argue, for instance, that the entire subplot with the father could have been left out. It kind of does more harm than good in the movie. Maybe, her father is extremely important, was important to her and a big part of this. I don't know. Maybe this was sort of a fabrication for Hollywood. I couldn't tell you. But you get the feeling that it's like, they put this race in or they put this thing in because it was like sort of important biographical information, but it doesn't exactly contribute to the story yet. I think you'll get what I mean if you watch this movie for some reason. Certainly, they could have been more judicious. Now, on the other hand, one of the strengths of the movie is that it shows how Muldowney's career went through all kinds of twists and turns, unlike the races. It shows how progress isn't really linear, like the races, how there's all kinds of setbacks, how something that seems totally fundamental can change, how you take for granted, these are my people, this is my team, this is what we're going to do. And man, life really has different eras, doesn't it? The movie has an episodic feel to it that really works. And, it does seem to capture, surprisingly forcefully, the passing of time and the things of life. So maybe just don't watch the first third of the movie. You kind of have to. Once Shirley's marriage is on the rocks, that's when things start to get good. Once there's more turmoil, things start to get good. And if you stay to the end, you will see a couple of truly great scenes. For instance, there is a scene towards the end of the movie where Muldowney does a radio interview. This is a brilliant scene. Moving, subtle, terrific acting, slightly strange as well, and crawling with tension. I won't tell you exactly what happens, but she's going to announce something on the radio, and she's really torn about sort of what she should do, or she's considering which way to go, and she's going to announce this in this radio interview. And when she calls in, the radio interviewer guy, which is a brilliant performance, just playing out over the phone, brilliant little bit part from someone. The radio guy, kind of barely knows who she is, isn't really interested in the personal stuff. It's like the tension between her emotions and the sort of impersonal element of this is, it's a great scene. I would not tell you that this is a great movie, but there are a couple pieces here and there that are really good. The film, in truth, has 3 strong characters in it. Muldowney, Kalita, and Muldowney's husband, maybe 2.5 strong characters, I guess. Kalita is in a superposition between being this golden retriever, super encouraging, nice guy, and a conniving womanizer. This character never yields to analysis. You're not going to figure out which one it is. There's not going to be some nice moral finish to the story. Exactly. Great character. That's Beau Bridges. And great character, great role. Shirley, at first, runs the risk of being idealized being a little simplistic in some ways, especially in this first third of the movie that is kind of simplistic. But as things go on, this changes somewhat. The early parts of the movie focus largely on a woman's role in society, which obviously was a huge part of Muldowney's life. She has to cope with the stereotypes in the 50s and 60s. She married at 16 in a small town. She raised a family alongside her racing career. There were huge barriers for her to become a driver. Nobody really wanted to let her race. All of this stuff, without a doubt, hugely important to her movie and emblematic of a time. Unfortunately, these are some of the less subtle parts of the movie, and maybe these things weren't subtle, but the movie kicks into gear more when we shift to personal turmoil and somewhat more subtle ideas of her life as a woman. In the movie, Muldowney is an interesting balance because she is in some ways a very traditional character, but she is also a very fierce, boundary-pushing person. She has this traditional upbringing and context, and in some ways she's committed to that. She's committed to her family. She rebuffs a lot of men. She doesn't want to have any affairs, or maybe she doesn't want men to have affairs with her. She'll be tested here, I guess, and she's pretty firm in her convictions throughout. You know, at the same time, she is pursuing this racing career, which is not traditional at all, and she does push the boundary between her. She does push the boundary all the time, and you see her husband, in many cases, wanting to be more cautious, and her being bold and making things happen. Interesting. There's also some kind of balance between her having a thick skin and hanging with the guys, but also being not prim exactly, but buttoned up a little bit and committed to some kind of righteous living, and, you know, also being the main character in a Hollywood movie. Like I said, the real Shirley Muldowney seems like she was probably a lot more gruff. That probably is what happens in real life if you spend all of your time in the pits. In the movie, it's a little bit different, but it does accentuate this theme of balancing a more traditional womanhood with being a drag racer, right? Which obviously is one of the main kind of ideas of the movies. There isn't a huge intellectual force to this movie, but it does it does a pretty good job of psychological realism, unpacking or giving you a sense of this place and what was going on up here. Now, speaking of the pits, if you don't know anything about drag racing, you probably, or if you do know anything about drag racing, I mean, you probably won't find this movie to be particularly authentic. I'm guessing. Even for me, some of the jargon seemed a little phony. Many of the races serve as plot points, and you have to do some contriving to make that work, to marry the race into an approachable plot. Like, oh, you know, the mixture was too lean in this one. I told you not to make it so lean or whatever. Like, yeah, I don't know. It's a little contrived. They just survive this part. Like I said, I don't think you would feel that the races are authentic, but they do have a certain feel to them, and they have a certain energy. They don't feel cheap. Okay, the track announcers spell everything out for you. That could be a lot more subtle. But there is something about the energy somehow that like rings true for me. Not that I've ever been to a drag race, but it gives you something. The film is almost totally unremarkable in terms of cinematography, but the races themselves are pretty well shot, pretty dynamic. They got cameras all over the place. I don't have a lot to break down with this one. I was thinking about turning off the movie after about 10 minutes. I'm glad I stuck it out. Heart Like a Wheel absolutely has its moment, although I'm not sure I would recommend it to anyone who is not from Olympia or who is not into drag racing.